Hello, dear friends. Welcome back to Timeless Stories, where we learn English through powerful stories from history. Today, we will follow the life of Nelson Mandela, a man who spent more than 27 years in prison and then walked out without asking for revenge. He had every reason to become bitter. He had lost years with his children. He had missed funerals. He had slept on a cold floor and worked under a burning sun. Yet when freedom finally came, he chose negotiation, forgiveness, and peace. How can a person suffer for so long without losing hope? How can a prisoner become a president? And how can one human being help a deeply divided country begin again? As you listen, you can improve your English vocabulary, pronunciation, and listening skills. But this is more than an English lesson. It is a story about courage, patience, responsibility, and the difficult choice to build a future with people who once treated you as an enemy. So sit back, breathe slowly, and stay with me until the end. The most important part of Nelson Mandela's story is not only that he became free, it is what he decided to do with his freedom. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in Mvezo, a small village in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. He belonged to the Madiba clan of the Thembu people. Later, many South Africans would lovingly call him Madiba. His name, Rolihlahla, can be understood as pulling a branch from a tree. In everyday speech, it can also suggest a person who causes trouble. Years later, the boy with that name would challenge one of the most powerful and unjust systems in the world. Mandela's father, Nkosi Mfakanyiswa Gadla Mandela, was an advisor to the acting king of the Thembu people. His mother, Nonkafi Nosekeni, was a woman of faith who cared for her family with patience and strength. The family did not live with modern comfort. Their home was simple. There was no electricity and no running water. Mandela spent much of his childhood outside. He watched cattle, played with other children, ran across the hills, and listened to older people tell stories. Those evening stories were important. The elders spoke about African leaders, brave fighters, and communities that had resisted foreign control. Young Mandela did not yet understand politics, but he understood dignity. He began to imagine that one day he might also serve his people. At primary school, his teacher gave him the English name Nelson. At that time, African children were often given European names in mission schools. The young boy accepted the name, but the traditions of his home remained deeply inside him. When Mandela was about 12, his father died. This loss changed his life. He was taken to Makekezweni, the Great Place, and became a ward of Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the acting king of the Thembu people. Life at the Great Place was different from life in his small village. Important visitors came to discuss community problems. Mandela watched meetings where men spoke, argued, listened, and searched for agreement. He noticed something about Jongintaba's leadership. The king did not always speak first. He often listened while others shared their views. Only after everyone had spoken did he offer a conclusion. This left a deep impression on Mandela. Leadership, he began to understand, was not only about giving orders. It was also about hearing people, respecting them, and helping a group move forward together. Mandela studied at respected schools, including Clarkbury and Heald Town. He later entered the University College of Fort Hare, one of the few higher education institutions open to Black Africans at that time. At Fort Hare, Mandela met ambitious young people from different parts of Africa. He became more independent, more confident, and more willing to question authority. Then a student protest changed his direction. Mandela joined a dispute about student representation and was expelled. When he returned to the Great Place, Jongintaba ordered him to return to the university. The regent also planned marriages for Mandela and his cousin Justice. Mandela faced a choice. He could obey and accept a future selected for him, or he could leave and build his own life. In 1941, Mandela and Justice ran away to Johannesburg. Johannesburg was larger, faster, and harder than anything Mandela had known. Gold mines had made the city rich, but the wealth was not shared equally. Black workers performed dangerous labor, earned low wages, and lived under strict rules. White citizens held most political and economic power. Mandela first worked as a security guard at a gold mine. The job did not last. For a time, his future was uncertain. He had little money and no clear position. Then he met Walter Sisulu, a man who would become one of his closest friends and political partners. Through Sisulu, Mandela found work as a clerk in a law office. During the day, he learned about legal documents. At night, he studied. He completed his Bachelor of Arts degree through the University of South Africa and later began studying law at the University of the Witwatersrand, usually called WITS. Mandela was not a perfect student. Politics, work, and family responsibilities often took his attention. But the university exposed him to people with different backgrounds and ideas. He met African, Indian, communist, liberal, and trade union activists. Their discussions helped him see that injustice was not only a personal problem. It was built into the laws of the country. In 1944, Mandela joined the African National Congress, or ANC. The ANC had been created to defend the rights of Black South Africans, but Mandela and other young activists believed it needed more energy and stronger public action. Together with Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, Anton Lembede, and others, he helped form the ANC Youth League. They wanted ordinary people to become active through boycotts, strikes, peaceful resistance, and mass organization. That same year, Mandela married Evelyn Mace, a nurse. They built a family and had children. Mandela loved his family. But his political work demanded more and more of his time. Mandela was trying to become a lawyer, support a home, and fight an unjust system at the same time. His family also carried the cost of his public mission. In 1948, the National Party came to power and began to strengthen apartheid. Apartheid was a system of racial separation and white minority control. It decided where people could live, work, study, travel, and receive medical care. It controlled marriage, land, movement, and political rights. Black South Africans were the majority of the population, but they could not vote in national elections. Families could be removed from their homes. Workers had to carry pass documents. A person could be arrested simply for being in the wrong place without the correct paper. Mandela saw the law being used not to protect people, but to control them. In 1952, the ANC and the South African Indian Congress organized the Defiance Campaign. Volunteers peacefully broke selected apartheid laws. They entered places where the government said they did not belong. They refused to obey rules they believed were unjust. Mandela became the campaign's national volunteer-in-chief. He traveled, organized, and encouraged people to act with discipline. The government arrested him and other leaders. He received a suspended sentence and was later banned, which limited his movement and his ability to attend meetings. But 1952 also brought an important professional achievement. Mandela and Oliver Tambo opened one of South Africa's earliest black-owned law firms. Their office became a place of hope. People came after arrests under pass laws, forced removals, and unfair treatment at work. Listening to them showed Mandela that apartheid was not only a political idea. It entered homes, separated families, and limited the futures of children. In 1955, people from different racial groups gathered at Kliptown and adopted the Freedom Charter. Its message was simple and revolutionary. South Africa belonged to all who lived in it. Because Mandela was banned, he could not openly take part. He watched in secret. The next year, the government arrested Mandela and many other activists. They were accused of treason. The trial continued for years. In the end, Mandela and the remaining defendants were found not guilty in 1961. During those difficult years, his marriage to Evelyn ended. In 1958, Mandela married Winnie Madikizela, a social worker. They later had 2 daughters. Police watched the family home, and raids, restrictions, and long absences became normal. Winnie later became an important and controversial figure in the struggle. Then, on March 21, 1960, a terrible event shocked South Africa. In Sharpeville, police opened fire on unarmed people protesting pass laws. 69 people were killed. Many were shot while running away. the massacre changed the political atmosphere. The government declared a state of emergency and banned the ANC and another organization, the Pan-Africanist Congress. For years, Mandela had supported mass protest and nonviolent resistance. Now he and others faced a painful question. What should people do when peaceful action is answered with bullets, and when legal political organizations are forbidden? Mandela did not make the next decision lightly. He understood that violence could create more violence. He also believed that doing nothing would allow oppression to continue. In 1961, he helped establish Umkhonto we Sizwe, meaning Spear of the Nation. The organization first focused on sabotage against government buildings and infrastructure. Its early strategy aimed to avoid loss of life while showing that apartheid could not continue without resistance. This was a major turning point. Mandela was no longer only a lawyer and protest leader. He became a man living underground. He changed clothes, used false names, slept in different places, and moved secretly across the country. Newspapers called him the Black Pimpernel because the police struggled to capture him. In January 1962, Mandela secretly left South Africa. He traveled through several African countries and visited England. He asked for political support and received military training in Morocco and Ethiopia. When he returned, he knew arrest was possible. On August 5, 1962, police stopped a car near Howick. Mandela was inside. His life as a free man was over. He was charged with leaving the country illegally and encouraging a strike. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. While he was already imprisoned, police raided Lily's Leaf Farm in Rivonia, a secret meeting place used by activists. They found documents that connected Mandela and others to plans of resistance. Mandela was brought to court with his comrades in what became known as the Rivonia Trial. They faced charges of sabotage, and they knew the court could sentence them to death. Mandela decided to use the courtroom as a place to explain his beliefs. He spoke against both white domination and black domination. He described his hope for a democratic society in which people could live with equal opportunities. At the end, he said that this democratic ideal was one he hoped to live for, but, if necessary, an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The courtroom became silent. On June 12, 1964, Mandela and 7 others were sentenced to life imprisonment. He was sent to Robben Island, a prison surrounded by cold ocean water near Cape Town. The island was designed not only to hold prisoners, but to make them feel forgotten. Mandela's cell was very small. For years, he slept on a thin mat. Prisoners received poor food, wore short clothing in cold weather, and were treated differently according to the racial categories of apartheid. During the day, Mandela and other prisoners worked in a limestone quarry. The white stone reflected the sun into their eyes. The dust entered their bodies. The work was exhausting. And the damage to Mandela's eyes stayed with him for the rest of his life. The guards controlled letters and visits. Messages were delayed, cut, or refused. Contact with family was painfully limited. Then came two losses that deeply wounded him. His mother died in 1968. His eldest son, Thembu, died in a car accident in 1969. Mandela was not allowed to attend either funeral. Imagine sitting alone in a prison cell and learning that someone you love is gone. Imagine knowing that your family is grieving while you cannot hold them, speak to them, or stand beside them. Mandela later became a symbol, but symbols do not cry in public. Human beings do. Prison took years from him that could never be returned. His children grew older without him. His marriage suffered. Friends died. The outside world changed, while his days were measured by bells, walls, and orders. Still, Mandela refused to let the prison decide what kind of man he would become. He exercised every morning. He studied. He discussed politics and history with other prisoners. He encouraged younger men to continue their education. Robben Island became known by some prisoners as a university. They learned from books, from debates, and from one another. Mandela also studied Afrikaans, the language spoken by many prison guards and government officials. Some people asked why he wanted to learn the language of those who oppressed him. His reason was practical. To negotiate with another person, he believed, you should understand that person's words, history, fears, and way of thinking. This did not mean accepting injustice. It meant preparing to overcome it. Mandela also worked to improve prison conditions. He challenged unfair rules, but he tried to remain controlled and respectful. He learned the names of guards. He noticed their personalities. Over time, some guards began to see him not simply as a prisoner, but as a human being. This was one of Mandela's special strengths. He could oppose a system while still seeing the humanity of individuals inside that system. Outside, students, workers, and communities continued to resist. Around the world, Free Nelson Mandela appeared on banners and in songs. International pressure and sanctions grew. His body remained behind walls, but his name traveled everywhere. In 1982, after 18 years on Robben Island, he was moved to Pollsmoor Prison. The government began to understand that apartheid could not survive forever. Mandela received conditional offers of freedom. The government wanted him to reject resistance before it fully changed the system. He refused. He would not accept personal freedom while millions of other people remained politically unfree. In the mid-1980s, Mandela quietly began contact with government representatives. This was a risky decision. Some comrades might think he was making private deals, Some government officials still saw him as an enemy. But Mandela understood that wars usually end through talking. He believed resistance had created pressure, and now negotiation might create a new country. In 1988, he became seriously ill with tuberculosis. After hospital treatment, he was moved to Victor Verster Prison, where he spent the final 14 months of his imprisonment. Then, on February 11, 1990, the prison gates opened. Nelson Mandela walked into the sunlight holding Winnie's hand. He was 71 years old. His hair had turned gray. The young lawyer who had entered prison was gone, but his purpose remained. Crowds celebrated across South Africa. Millions of people around the world watched on television. Yet freedom did not mean the struggle was finished. In some ways, the most dangerous part was beginning. South Africa was filled with anger, fear, weapons, and painful memories. Political violence continued. Many black South Africans wanted immediate justice after generations of oppression. Many white South Africans feared losing their safety, homes, or future. Mandela had to speak to both hope and fear. He did not ask oppressed people to forget. He did not say apartheid had caused no damage. Instead, he argued that South Africa needed justice without becoming trapped in endless revenge. He met with President F.W. de Klerk and took part in difficult negotiations. The talks were not peaceful every day. There were walkouts, killings, distrust, and moments when the process seemed close to failure. Mandela could be warm, but he could also be firm. Reconciliation did not mean weakness. He wanted one person, one vote, a democratic constitution, and equal citizenship. In 1993, Mandela and de Klerk jointly received the Nobel Peace Prize for their work toward ending apartheid and building democratic rule. Then came April 27, 1994. For the first time, South Africans of every race could vote in a national democratic election. People stood in long lines. Some were old and had waited their entire lives for this moment. Mandela also voted for the first time. The ANC won the election, and on May 10, 1994, Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first democratically elected president. At his inauguration, former prisoners stood near former enemies. World leaders watched as a country built on racial rule entered a new period. Mandela did not become president to replace white control with black control. He wanted a shared democracy. His government faced enormous problems. Millions needed homes, water, electricity, schools, clinics, and jobs. Apartheid had created inequality that one election could not remove, and poverty, crime, and unemployment continued. The new Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, allowed victims to describe what had happened. Under legal conditions, some offenders could receive amnesty by telling the full truth. The process was painful and imperfect, but it helped the country face its past publicly. Mandela also used symbols to bring people together. In 1995, South Africa hosted the Rugby World Cup. For many black South Africans, the Springbok rugby team had long represented white power. Some wanted its name and symbols removed. Mandela saw another possibility. He supported the team and appeared at the final wearing the Springbok captain's number 6 jersey. When South Africa defeated New Zealand, the stadium filled with celebration. One rugby match did not end racism, but for a moment, people who had once stood on opposite sides shared the same flag, the same team, and the same joy. Mandela understood that nations are built not only through laws. They are also built through gestures that help people imagine a common future. In 1999, after one term, he stepped down as president. This decision was also part of his legacy. Many leaders hold power for as long as possible. Mandela showed that public office belonged to the country, not to one man. In retirement, he continued to support children, education, peace, and leadership. He helped create foundations and raised awareness about HIV and AIDS. This issue became personal when his son Mvezo died from an AIDS-related illness in 2005. At a time when many families felt shame and silence around the disease, Mandela spoke openly about the cause of his son's death. He wanted people to understand that hiding the truth only made the crisis worse. In 1998, at the age of 80, Mandela married Graça Machel. In his later years, he reduced public appearances, but his presence remained powerful. Nelson Mandela died at his home in Johannesburg on December 5, 2013. He was 95 years old. People gathered outside his home, singing and lighting candles. Leaders from around the world came to South Africa. But Mandela's true legacy did not belong only to presidents or famous people. It lived in the long voting lines of 1994. It lived in the prisoners who studied together on Robben Island. It lived in families who finally saw loved ones return from exile. It lived in a country that had stood near civil war and still chose a democratic future. Nelson Mandela was not perfect. His choices remain part of historical debate. His family paid a heavy price, and his government could not solve every problem. Courage does not require perfection. It requires responsibility when every choice is difficult. Mandela's greatest victory was protecting his ability to choose. Prison controlled his food, work, letters, and visits, but he fought to keep control of his character. When the gates opened, he could use suffering to justify hatred or to understand its cost. He chose to build. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting justice or quietly accepting abuse. Real peace requires truth and change. Mandela's lesson was that an enemy should not decide who we become. Your struggle may be failure, rejection, loneliness, family pressure, or a distant dream. You cannot control every event or change the past, but you can choose your next step. You can study when progress feels slow. You can listen before you lead. You can remain firm without becoming cruel. You can stand against injustice without losing your humanity. And when life closes one road, you can keep walking until another road appears. Nelson Mandela's journey was long. It moved from a village to a royal home, from a university protest to a great city, from a law office to an underground movement, from a courtroom to a prison cell, and from that cell to the presidency. But the deepest journey happened inside him. A young man who once wanted to defeat a system became an older man who also understood the need to build relationships after that system ended. He learned that leadership is not only the courage to fight, it is also the patience to negotiate. It is not only the power to win, it is also the wisdom to share a country with people who are afraid of your victory. It is not only standing at the front. Sometimes, it is listening until every voice has been heard. When you remember Nelson Mandela, remember 3 images. Remember the village boy listening to stories under the night sky. Remember the prisoner breaking stone in the bright limestone quarry, still preparing his mind for freedom. And remember the elderly man walking through an open gate, carrying 27 years of pain, but choosing not to carry revenge. Which of these moments stays with you the most? The boy who began to dream, the prisoner who refused to break, or the free man who chose reconciliation? Tell me in the comments. Your answer can be simple, and it is also a good way to practice your English. If this story gave you hope, please like the video and subscribe for more slow English stories about history, courage, and the people who changed our world. Thank you for spending this time with me. Keep learning, keep moving forward, and remember that even a long road can lead to freedom. Until next time, take care, my friends, here on Timeless Stories.